Hi, I'm Brandon Powell, and this is the Why It Matters podcast. This particular podcast is going to be dedicated to one of my favorite devotional books of all time, The Imitation of Christ. This book is considered the second most read book after the Bible. It was written in the 1400s by a monk named Thomas à Kempis. At first glance, it is a book written by a monk to other monks. It's really easy to try to dismiss this book then, because if you are listening to this podcast, you are unlikely to be a monk. Yet there are so many aspects of this writing that applies to every phase of our lives. Whether you are working or a stay-at-home mom, whether you are trying to be holy in the midst of a corporate atmosphere, or even if you are retired. In each phase of life, we have an enemy, the devil, who, as sacred scripture mentions in 1 Peter, is prowling around like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. In every phase of life, we are going to face challenges, pressure, and temptation. If we wait until we are in a time of peace and tranquility before we really examine ourselves and fight the good fight to live a holy life, then we will never rise up to the challenge. We are always going to have challenges, and yet we must also realize we always have a call to holiness in our lives, and we must contend with that call. The call to be holy is the most repeated commandment throughout the entirety of Scripture. Be holy as I am holy. So I grew up in the evangelical world and was a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene for 6.5 years. I preached in that denomination for 17 years. I wish I had stumbled across this amazing book back when I was a pastor. Now, I probably would have thrown it in the trash because I was so anti-Catholic, yet over the last several years, I've grown to appreciate this book. It has been a source of constant challenge, encouragement, and renewal in my life. It is a book that you can come back to over and over again. It's a book that you can set aside and pick it up later and still be challenged. In other words, there are some books like The Dark Night of the Soul or The Interior Castle where you have to read it consistently and in order, because those books are building from a spiritual foundation and building each layer on top of it. You have to understand the basic foundation to understand the theological ideas that they are developing. The Imitation of Christ is different. In each paragraph, we can be challenged without having ever read the chapters that go before it. So we're going to go through this book paragraph by paragraph and just be challenged. I'm intending on keeping each podcast episode short and let each paragraph resonate, marinate within us. I might release some longer edits of some chapters later on for those who prefer a longer podcast, but I want this podcast to be just as accessible as the book we are reading. I'm going to share my thoughts and bring in some thoughts from saints and others wiser in the faith, and I'm going to bring in scriptures as well as we really try to unpack each paragraph. May God bless this effort, and thanks for joining us on Why It Matters.